Have you ever wondered why the Yugo is widely considered to be the worst car ever made? Cheaply built, notoriously unreliable, and dangerously unsafe, and that's some of the good points. It became a global symbol of automotive failure. From constant breakdowns to poor design, the Yugo's legacy lives on as the ultimate example of how not to build a car on today's episode of 5 Weird Things. Welcome to the channel. First, like, subscribe, share, and for God's sake, join the channel for some exclusive stuff and to see videos and shorts before everybody else. Now, when it comes to Yugos, I actually have a story. Right after I got back from the military in the late 80s, I took a buddy of mine around on a Saturday to test drive new cars. We weren't going to buy anything, we just wanted to test drive. Now, midday, my buddy decides he wants to test drive a Jeep. So we pull into the Jeep dealership, and it turns out they're selling Yugos. Now, even then, I knew they were trash. My father has been a lifelong mechanic, and he said that he'd never seen one moving just at the side of the road with the hood up. So while my buddy lied to the Jeep salesman, I mistakenly wandered over to the Yugo side because I love a train wreck. A salesman in a cheap suit sprinted, not walked fast, sprinted out to me. He was like a movie director asked Central Casting for a sleazy car salesman, and this guy showed up for the audition. He gave me every horrible pitch a bad salesman can make, and I used to sell cars at one point. Then he invited me into the office. 8 sales guys standing around with no customers, eating lunch. 1 pizza box for 8 guys. The salesman takes a slice of pizza out of someone else's hands and gives it to me. He then tries to close me in the sloppiest way possible. When I said I don't have a down payment, which they were only looking for $300, he offered to loan it to me. When I said I had bad credit, he offered to co-sign on the loan. It's grim days at the Yugo dealership back then. Now, what about you? Got a Yugo story? Tell me down in the comments. All right, let's get into it. First, the basic things that we all need to know. The Yugo was a subcompact car produced by Zastava Automobiles in the former Yugoslavia. Launched in the US market in 1985 as the Yugo GV. Great value. It was the brainchild of a socialist-era state-run factory trying to tap into the Western capitalist markets. The car was assembled in the town of Kragujevac, and I had to Google that to figure out how to pronounce it. I'm still not sure I got it right, but it's in Serbia, and using parts based on older Fiat models. You figured they'd work better. Now, amid Cold War tensions and economic struggles, exporting the Yugo was seen as a way for Yugoslavia to earn desperately needed foreign currency because their dollar was worth nothing. Now, priced at just $39.90, which was cheap even back in 1985, it quickly gained attention as the cheapest new car in America, and around 794,000 units were produced globally, with over 141,000 sold in the US from 85 to 92. So despite its initial popularity, it soon became infamous for poor build quality, unreliability, and dreadful crash safety. By the late 90s, the Yugo had become a cultural punchline, often topping the worst car ever lists nonstop. Today, Yugo is a nostalgic oddity, but its bizarre legacy still fascinates collectors, meme makers, and those who love a good automotive underdog story. As far as I can see, underdogs shouldn't apply here because typically that's the one that comes from behind to win. Yugo did not come from behind to win. Everybody got that? Good. Weird thing number 5, the interior design. Now, the interior of the Yugo looked like it was designed by someone who had never actually been inside a car, or maybe just didn't care. Everything about the cabin screamed budget or just flat out cheap, and not in a charming minimalist way. The seats felt more like folding chairs bolted to the floor than actual automotive seating. The upholstery seemed to be made from leftover materials rejected by airport furniture makers. The dashboard was a sea of brittle plastic. Somebody that watches the channel write in and say that they saw one at auction and the dash looked like particle board. Now, there were buttons and knobs that felt like they came from a discount toy store. Controls were laid out with all the logic of a dream someone forgot upon waking. And you want to adjust the heat? Good luck. If the knob doesn't fall off, you still had to guess which direction did what. The glove compartment was barely big enough to hold actual gloves. And the only luxury you could hope for was maybe a functioning radio, if the wires hadn't already shaken loose. Now, weird fact about the interior, Yugo's horn button wasn't on the steering column in the early models. It was awkwardly placed in the dashboard. So if you needed to honk in a hurry, you had to let go of the wheel that controls the car and poke around blindly on the dash. Safety first. In short, the Yugo's interior wasn't just bad, it was an ergonomic puzzle that no one asked for. Weird thing number 4, the reliability. The Yugo was so infamously unreliable, owning one often felt more like adopting a troubled pet than driving a car. Mechanical issues were not the exception. They were practically a main feature. Engines stalled unexpectedly, transmissions slipped like they were buttered, and the electrical systems had a mind of their own. You never quite knew what would fail next, only that something definitely would. Somebody told me that they were in the military with somebody that had a Yugo and nothing on it worked, not even the headlights, except for the heater, which was stuck on 24/7. Now, routine maintenance didn't help much either. You never quite knew what would fail next, only that something definitely would. Even the most diligent owners found themselves stranded by problems that should never happen in a modern vehicle, like wipers that stopped working in rain or doors that simply refused to open. Mechanics often groaned at the sight of a Yugo being towed in, and that happened a lot, and parts were really difficult to source, partly because so few people wanted to stock them. Weird fact about the reliability, in one documented case, a Yugo's gear shift snapped off in the driver's hand while driving. The driver had to steer to safety while holding the shifter like a gear-shaped trophy. If that's not a metaphor for Yugo ownership, nothing is. It wasn't just that major systems failed, it was these small, persistent gremlins that made everyday drives feel like a gamble. If you wanted to build character, a gym membership was cheaper and came with better odds of making it home alive. Weird thing number 3, the safety. The Yugo's safety features were so minimal, it's a wonder that the seatbelts weren't optional. Built at a time when car safety was really starting to ramp up as a priority, the Yugo seemed to miss that memo entirely. It had no airbags. It had no anti-lock brakes. It had no crumple zones unless you count the entire car, which crumpled like a soda can even in minor fender benders. I found an internet occurrence where somebody claimed they backed into another car that was backing out at the same time. The other car had a slight push on their bumper. The Yugo had to be towed away and was totaled later. Crash tests revealed the Yugo to be more of a suggestion of a car than an actual protective shell. The body panels were thin, the frame lacked structural integrity, and the steering column had a disturbing tendency to push inward on frontal impacts right where the driver's chest should be. Now in a Yugo, the only thing standing between you and disaster is wishful thinking and maybe a lucky rabbit's foot. Weird fact about the safety is that in the late 1980s, Consumer Reports declared that in a 40-mile-per-hour crash, the Yugo would likely collapse onto the front passengers, offering minimal survival space. One reviewer described the crumpling as accordion-like, which sounds musical, but not when your ribs are involved. So driving a Yugo wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, it was a gamble with physics. For drivers who valued safety, a tricycle might have offered more protection, and depending on the wind, possibly better handling. Weird thing number 2, the engine. The Yugo's engine was less power plant and more, mediocre hamster. With a tiny 1.1-liter 4-cylinder engine that produced a laughable 55 horsepower, a Model A gave you 45. The Yugo struggled to climb hills, merge onto highways, and even pass aggressive cyclists. Acceleration from 0 to 60 took a painful 14 seconds on a good day with the wind at your back and no passengers on board, maybe downhill. Driving a Yugo was not so much about speed as it was about momentum. You had to plan every move in advance, like a game of chess with traffic, physics, and geography involved. Need to pass a truck? Better hope the road's flat and at least a little bit long. The engine wheezed and groaned under pressure, sounding like it was begging you to stop and let it nap. Weird fact about the engine, in colder climates, some Yugo owners reported the engine actually refused to start unless they physically opened the hood and warmed it with a hairdryer or a hot water bottle. It was the only car that needed both gas and nurturing. Now in a world where even the most basic modern cars zip along comfortably, the Yugo's engine felt prehistoric. It might technically get you where you were going, but only after checking your schedule, eating a light snack, thinking about it for a little while, and then really encouraging it. You still might not get there. And finally, weird thing number 1, the build quality. The Yugo's build quality was so notoriously bad, it became a legend, but for all the wrong reasons. Built in the former Yugoslavia and rushed into the American market in the 1980s, the car often seemed like it was assembled along the way by people who had heard about cars once but never actually saw one. Parts didn't always fit. Hoods sometimes refused to close, doors misaligned and either refused to close or refused to open. And dashboards rattled like maracas on even the smoothest of roads, some detached mid-drive. Worse still, many Yugos started falling apart almost immediately after leaving the dealership. One infamous story tells of a Yugo owner whose rear window literally fell out while driving home from the lot. Interior knobs popped off with casual use. It wasn't just shoddy materials, it was the entire assembly process and materials. Some mechanics joke that Yugo stood for, "You unbelievably got owned." Now, a weird fact about the build quality. In 1989, a Yugo was blown off a bridge, literally. During a freak gust on Michigan's Mackinac Bridge, the car was so light and poorly weighted and unaerodynamic that the wind picked it up and threw it over the edge of the bridge. That's right, driving a Yugo could be considered an extreme sport under the right conditions. How did you get insurance if you bought a Yugo? Simply put, the Yugo was a masterclass on how not to build a car. Now, one last thing. There's an article going on, and I've had it verified on several different websites. Yugo is going to make a comeback. They have a car planned to be debuted in 2027, and it's going to go into production the same year. They claim it'll have modern safety features, a turbo engine, and it just sounds wonderful. Can't wait. And I wonder how many people are going to make that mistake again. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you liked it, or at least joined me in the hate. Do me a favor, watch more of my videos, join the channel to get some exclusives, and watch videos and shorts before everyone else. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a great day.